Should a company be responsible when workers don't get sick from the job, but their family members do? A Utah man says yes.
Yeah, tonight the KSL investigators examine his court battle over secondhand exposure and how it may have a larger impact. Small safety measures can head off big injuries on the job. Things like safety goggles, steel-toe boots, and hard hats.
That wind is cold, isn't it?
But what about hazards you take home with you? Larry Boynton says that is what happened to him, and it robbed him of his wife.
You didn't think he was hauling anything home that was going to do what it done.
Larry worked construction jobs back in the 1960s, raking up chunks of insulation just like this, containing asbestos. Later on, he became an electrician.
And pulled wire and hooked up motors and hung light fixtures and done everything.
In both jobs, he says the asbestos dust was constant. Larry wore that dust home on his clothes. Dust his wife shook out before she washed them.
We had no idea about anything was bad.
And then, in 2015, Barbara Boynton got sick.
They finally said, she doesn't have pneumonia. We wish she did.
Her diagnosis, mesothelioma, a cancer with only one known cause, breathing in tiny fibers of asbestos.
Everybody says everything's going to be okay, but it ain't okay.
Bringing a heartbreaking and early end to a long marriage.
28 days is all she lived.
Barbara's death is now at the center of a lawsuit Larry hopes will change how companies operate.
Your problem doesn't just end at the company gates.
Rick Nemiroff is Larry's lawyer. He says this case sends a strong message to industry.
If it leaves the gate and goes home in the car to the family home, your responsibility didn't end. You got to think further beyond that.
KSL investigators found that question of responsibility is at the heart of other cases across the country. Other couples have won recent cases in Louisiana and Alabama. But courts in Georgia and Arizona ruled if you are not the company's employee, you are not the company's liability. When Larry filed his lawsuit, Utah had not settled the issue. But the Utah Supreme Court has since found that by the early 1960s, there was substantial scientific evidence suggesting take-home exposure was sufficiently foreseeable. That means companies knew enough back then that they had a duty to protect loved ones at home. The decision allowed Larry's lawsuit and others like this to go to trial.
Then gets brought to other states that have not answered the question or states that have decided the other way.
In Utah, Larry originally sued 24 companies here that either made or used the asbestos products that he worked around. Some paid to settle, others were dismissed. He is still fighting one company, though, and that is Kennecott Utah Copper.
This year, a jury found the company was not negligent, but Larry is now fighting for a new trial. Kennecott's owner, Rio Tinto, would not talk to us about the case while it is pending, but in an email to KSL, they said the company prioritizes the safety of employees, contractors, and communities. In court, they argue they are not responsible and that when Larry worked there, the dangers of the products made from asbestos were not clear. Larry says the company's own records from 60 years ago dispute that.
They should be held responsible.
He's hoping industry and government will take notice.
And so we know that not just asbestos, but other toxic substances can be brought home.
Former EPA head scientist Tom Burke sees parallels between asbestos and toxins of today.
You know, imagine a pesticide applicator who applies the pesticides all day and uses a respirator perhaps to protect his lungs, but his clothing might be just filled with it, and he brings that home and hugs his kids. But I think asbestos is a great historical lesson.
A lesson he says many learned the hard way.
But lessons we can't forget.
And a lesson Larry hopes will prevent heartbreaking loss in other families.
And I tell people, when you're married and you got a partner, you go first, because it don't go away. That's Grandma Barbara. It's pretty tough when you're still here.
Larry's still waiting to hear whether he will get another trial in his wrongful death case. Kennecott argues even if he did, it would not change the outcome. Either way, though, the Utah Supreme Court decision helps open the way for similar legal fights here and nationwide as well.
Wow.